Hey guys, welcome to the show today. I'm super excited to be joined by Andy Schectman. He is from Miles Franklin Precious Metals. We've been having some people from some different areas on the show, and I saw Andy talking with Michelle McCory about things that we talk about on this channel: BRICS, the petrodollar, gold, all of this stuff, how it fits in to the overall economic system. I thought it'd be really great to bring him on. You can also find him on Twitter or x.com at Miles Franklin Co. That's CO at the end. And don't forget, you guys can also email him at info@milesfranklin.com if you're interested in a price list for some of their gold, or you have some questions or anything we talk about today. If you have questions about, they would be glad to answer, or Andy would be glad to answer. Andy, welcome to the show today.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate it. Yeah, info@milesfranklin.com is the best way because the prices on our website are nowhere near as good as the prices that we kind of keep close to the vest for a myriad of reasons. Anything you hear on this show, any questions you have, or just the price list, info@milesfranklin. I appreciate you saying that. And let's dig in. I'm glad to be here and have a conversation.
For sure. Well, I want to get to the petrodollar for sure, but I want to start with one of the main players over there because I had noticed that you had mentioned Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia obviously just ended the petrodollar agreement, but kind of more importantly, it's been kind of in the middle of like a tug of war between BRICS and kind of IMF United States side, because they said they were in BRICS, and then they released something saying, no, we don't know. And then they release something saying we are. And then they release something saying, we don't know again. And so they're not actually listed. They haven't sent, I think, deposits to a new development bank, and they're not they're not going to be added as an official new member soon. And you had mentioned kind of, why you thought that was. And, if you could kind of explain, I have a cat crawling behind me. If you could kind of explain to me kind of your viewpoint on Saudi Arabia and why that is. And then I've got some stuff I'd kind of like to share with you and get your opinion on.
Yeah, well, I do believe they are straddling the fence. I do believe that they, in essence, are in the BRICS, but they are, for the moment, kind of playing both sides. I mean, look, let's start. What got me following this would have been the reclassification of gold as tier one asset in 2019. That started me down this path. Why would the BIS do that? Make gold the only other tier one. And then I stumbled across the Belt Road Initiative, which is the largest infrastructure project in human history. And Saudi Arabia and all of the OPEC countries are on it. It is the largest infrastructure project ever done. As I mentioned, it's 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP, but every OPEC country is on it. This started to awaken me to what's going on. And if you look at what Saudi Arabia has done after joining the Belt Road, they have applied to the BRICS New Development Bank. They have applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional military and financial organization on the planet. Let's underscore military. They have
I wonder if
not.
that's right next to the new development bank. Is the new development bank in Shanghai as well?
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes, and in fact, they've also just become full participant in Project Enbridge, which is a big deal and very much tied into the new development bank. I think they realize this is a very delicate subject. It's
Right.
been a long-standing relationship with the West, but you know, when you realize that our lead economic advisor, Jared Bernstein, advocates for losing the petro status, that it's a privilege we can no longer afford. Many of your listeners may have seen this knucklehead try to explain bond purchases or bond sales and money creation on Twitter. It was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever
Oh,
seen.
it's that guy. Oh,
That's
yeah.
Jared
Where he was like,
Bernstein. He is the
I don't
lead
know,
economic.
actually. Is that right? Like, he didn't even know what he was talking about.
Yes, he's the lead economic advisor to the United States government, and he has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work. And this is our head economic advisor, a man who thinks we should no longer retain the world reserve status. And when you look at the acts that we've taken along the way, in particular, signing an executive order to go green, and which is really the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, our relationship with Saudi Arabia and the protection, and then also weaponizing the dollar against Russia, we couldn't take a better position in trying to erode the privilege of being the world reserve. But Saudi Arabia, I understand what you're saying, but if when I look at it, I see them, it is a big deal that they became full participants of the Project Enbridge. And depending upon where you look and read, some will say they are indeed members of the BRICS. They're just not really coming out and making a big deal about it. They're already selling their oil to
Right.
China, as an example, for yuan, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which is what? The only other tier one reserve asset. And I say these things because the BRICS just came out and issued a statement through the New Development Bank. The head of the New Development Bank, she came out and said that we have agreed upon a common settlement. Oh, Dilma Rousseff is her name. And Dilma came out and publicly said, we've agreed on a new settlement currency that will be 40% gold and 60% BRICS plus countries. And they're going to have a special meeting in September in Shanghai to talk about this. And then, of course, the big meeting in October. But look, Saudi Arabia, as far as I'm concerned, has, through their actions more than anything, shown that they are choosing sides. And as far as I'm concerned, they are members of the BRICS. They are members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They are members of the Belt Road Initiative and the New Development Bank. And they have made it very clear that they will sell oil for whatever currency they want. The dollar hegemony has been a function of the protection of the Saudi kingdom since 1974. And for that privilege, they would denominate oil exclusively in dollars, as they have for, almost 100% of all oil sales for the last 50 years have been done in US dollars. It also was any excess proceeds are reinvested into US treasuries. And you're seeing Saudi Arabia, amongst other BRICS nations like China and Russia and India, they're all dumping US treasuries and replacing it with commodities like gold and oil, which are being remonetized and revalued as assets worth more than the currencies that purchase them. So, yeah, I think Saudi Arabia is certainly hedging and indicating what side they are truly on.
I think you're dead right. I think you've nailed it exactly. And I kind of wanted to show you why I believe strongly and have been told this is exactly why Saudi Arabia is appearing to play both sides. And it's kind of like this. It's kind of like if, let's say, there is a guy at a bar and he goes and he tries to pick up this girl, and this girl is extremely attractive, extremely attractive. He's going to go about that a certain way. And, if he gets her, then that's good, but she's probably out of his league. She's probably not going to stay with him. That's how it is with Saudi Arabia and us right now. And the thing is we're playing the role of the sad sap that is begging them to stay. So, as you know, since the 70s with the petrodollar agreement, one of the things along with that have also been really big is their military contracts with our defense companies, such as Lockheed and I forgot the name of the other big one for a second. But the point is this deal right here that they made with Lockheed is why they cannot fully join BRICS right now. And there's more to this, because when I say like we're playing the role of the sad sap, it's because we were so desperate to keep them in our kind of power with the petrodollar and this deal that they worked out a deal with us that 50% of all of the parts and weapons and aircraft that get made from Lockheed are going to be made in Saudi Arabia. And so that's very important, of course, because we know that that means our technology and the way that we build this stuff, 50% of it is now going to move to Saudi Arabia, where they're going to do in their own plants. And so that's what led them in the middle. And, this is why they always, Saudi Arabia, as you know, I'm sure, always tries to play both sides of everything. They really have a masterful, way of politicking at the top. But you are exactly right. They are BRICS. They're BRICS for
Well,
sure. They're anti us, just like the rest of them are. And, for some of those countries for good reason. So I definitely
last
think it paints a very interesting picture here.
for sure, but and let's underscore, put an exclamation point on that. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when we had the G7 meeting in Italy, the Crown Prince was invited to the meeting. He said, "Yeah, thanks. I'm going to pass. I got some things going on."
Uh,
But he sent his finance ministers to the BRICS meeting in Novigrad, where it came out that 59 countries have applied to the BRICS on top of the 10 that are already there. And they came out where you had the head of the BRICS New Development Bank acknowledge this new unit. currency. And Sergei Glaziev was there also, the Russian and the Eurasian Economic Union finance minister, who he's the architect of this. For 3 years, and all these videos I've been doing since 2019 on the BRICS, I've said that they're going to have a common settlement currency, largely because Sergei Glaziev has talked about it. Now, the only difference is he said it would be a basket of currencies of the BRICS nations and a basket of commodities. But remember, I said the first thing that got me on this path in 2019 when I started doing YouTubes was the tier 1 revision of gold. For the Bank of International Settlements, the most powerful bank on the planet, to the central bank to reclassify gold as tier 1, the only other tier 1 next to US dollars and treasuries, it has to mean something. But then you see massive repatriation of gold by all of these central banks. Like the Bank of India just bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they bought in the first 4 months this year. They bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they bought all of last year, and they brought it all home, including 100 metric tons that were being held since 1991 at the Bank of England. They would leave it there because it gives you
Oh,
great access.
you're saying they repatriated it from England and brought it home,
Right,
right?
and they would leave it
That's
there.
what I was saying, because I was gonna bring that up. That was something that was on my list here, is Africa and India repatriating. So, yeah, let's hear more about this.
Yeah, they would leave it there because it would give them access to the London Bullion Market Association. And to your point, when I go back to, I mean, I guess I should even go back a year before, and it was 2017 when I really started noticing, because the Bundesbank in Germany said to the United States in a very public manner, give us back our gold that you've been holding at the New York Fed. And it was weird because that was in the middle of a 6-year downdraft in the price of gold. Why do they want it back? Well, after that happened, shortly thereafter, within a few months, you had the Dutch National Bank, the Bank of Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Czech National Bank. They all said the same thing. Then those banks the next year bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years previously combined. It doubled that amount in 2019. And then, coincidentally, the BIS reclassified it as the only other tier 1. They were obviously told. So India, as I mentioned, they buy 1.5 times the amount of gold they did all of last year, which, by the way, was the biggest year ever for central bank purchases.
Mhm.
And they did that in the first 4 months of this year, brought it back plus the 100 tons. And to your point, what you just were saying, a few weeks ago, Nigeria, Algeria, South Africa, Ghana, Cameroon, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. I think I might be missing one or two, but all of these banks repatriated their gold from the New York Fed, which is
And
the
then
COMEX.
did you see it? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Andy, but did you see the stuff going on in Kenya, the revolt against the IMF?
I have not seen that. No,
Yeah,
I have
that's
not.
been breaking story the last 24 hours. There were some protesters that were actually killed in Kenya, and it was because they're protesting, they're rejecting the IMF. They're saying no because of what you're saying. All these countries, look, he who controls the gold controls the world. Look at the history of it, and one piece of evidence of that is like China, for instance. Like now, I think like 5% of their reserves or something are is gold. They're buying gold at huge amounts in China, and you start seeing the gold just moving around to all these countries that are gaining influence, not losing it, and you kind of start to understand why all this stuff's so important. It's what has really made me start really understanding and searching this stuff.
Well, I would tell you that the percentage of gold in their reserves is probably a hell of a lot more, in that they don't
Of course.
disclose how much they buy. They haven't for years. And I've been doing this for 34 years, and it was always China doesn't tell, China doesn't tell. For years, their numbers would stay the same, yet they're the largest importer in the world and the largest producer of gold in the world, the largest. And they have banks like ICBC, I think it's called. They will buy on proxy for the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, which is not reported to the IMF. And if they buy gold that's not 9995 pure, if it's less than that, it's not reported. And they'll do sovereign wealth funds. It's not reported. We see things like the COMEX in 2015 made a contract that's physically deliverable in Hong Kong. It's called exchange for physical. They buy the contract on COMEX in New York, and they exchange for physical to be delivered in Hong Kong, which is a BRICS facility. 5-6 weeks ago, there was 7,560 gold kilobars delivered to BRICS Hong Kong, and that's $580 million worth of gold. The COMEX usually only deals in 100-ounce gold bars. They have mini contracts with kilobars, but who does deal in kilobars is the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And the theory is that they are draining the Western exchanges using the manipulation of the Western markets to suppress gold and silver because they are the canary in the mine shaft to drain the exchange. You see, these exchanges, both the LBMA and COMEX, have delivery mechanisms, but they were never designed for that. They figure, yeah, we have to offer it to give it legitimacy, but no one will do it. And it was true. The LBMA is 140 years old, but COMEX is since 74. And most of these countries in the Southern Hemisphere, up until just recently, were not coordinated enough, sophisticated enough, wealthy enough, or cunning enough to drain the system, to take delivery. But this is what they are doing. They are trucking them over upon delivery in Hong Kong to the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which over the last 75 days, the cumulated volume between the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which is cash and carry, here's the money, here's the gold, and the Shanghai Futures Exchange has exceeded that of the COMEX. It's increased by 200%. And it's now it's the second most active metals hub on the planet. There are guys like Alistair McLeod, who I put a tremendous amount of stock in. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He'll tell you they have 38,000 metric tons, not the 2,700 they're telling us, that the people have 18,000 and the state has 20. There's a wide gamut of people who are making guesses. But what I will say is that China understands what gold is. It's wealth. It's not an investment. It's wealth, and they've had that understanding for thousands of years, and they are accumulating it and not telling. Why would they ever want to tell us? And it's just as silly to believe the opposite. Here in the United States, we supposedly have 8,311 metric
No,
tons or whatever,
yeah.
but it hasn't been audited since '56. And when Ron Paul
Right.
said, let's audit Fort Knox, he was turned down. Why? It's
Of
not in
course, it was turned
anyone.
down.
It's not in the
Yeah.
country's vested interest to tell anyone how much gold they have. So China
No.
probably has way, way, way more than we do, and way more than the world assumes they do. And when you realize it's now the only other tier one asset, and the BRICS currency will be 40%, the settlement currency will be 40% backed by gold. These things start to come into, oh yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I think it's a lot more than the world thinks. But to your point, central banks are buying it at a level the world's never seen before.
Yeah, and I think really for my audience to kind of understand this, like what's happening is that all of these countries have had all of these dollars forever, right? Ever since we became the reserve currency at Bretton Woods, they have dollars. All the countries must have dollars to in their banks to exchange international transfers and things like that. So what's happening is now those dollars that we use to buy goods and commodities to come over to the United States, now those goods and commodities are old and used. And unfortunately, we're getting all the dollars back too on top of it now. And so what you're seeing is you're seeing the value of the dollar go down, and these countries are buying gold because they know what's coming. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't exactly unequivocal on a lot of things. It's really hard to tell people that there's not a lot of hope for this country. It's really hard to say that. But one thing I noticed in your interview is, you do seem to have some level of hope, much more. I think it's done. It's all done. BRICS is taking over. They're going to take over the reserve. There's nothing we can do to stop that. CBDCs are coming. It's coming. It's just a matter of how fast. And so what people don't understand, I had this tweet I put out the other day that basically said, right now we are frogs in water, and we are in the transition from the lukewarm where we're fine, to the boiling where we'll die. But we haven't figured it out yet. You got the Atlantic Council out there pushing an article this week saying, BRICS failed. The dollar's still the best, and still the dollar is beating BRICS. That's what the sister of the Council of Foreign Relations, an American think tank, put out as an article in a report that went all over crypto a couple days ago. And in my opinion, my message to people is preparing them for what's coming. It doesn't have to be apocalypse. We can keep some standard of living here, but we're done at being the world power. The reserve currency is going to transfer into BRICS Pay. BRICS Pay is going to become, and the dollar is going, if we're lucky, if we handle this the right way and it doesn't go totally south, which I think you're seeing some military positioning just in case things go south here, not because people want to threaten us. Because there will be some civil unrest when we lose this reserve currency. We just lost the petrodollar agreement. Nobody even knows, right? So when people start feeling all this stuff, it could be very bad, but it doesn't have to be Armageddon. It can be normal transition, and the best hope for the dollar is to become a high-valued currency in the basket of currencies that is in BRICS Pay. That's the way that I see it going. I just don't think there's no American patriotism. There's not like, hey guys, in the last minute, Donald Trump will save us. No, Donald Trump's probably the one that's going to give us the CBDC and we're going to ask for it.
Well,
So that's how I feel.
you're the
Yeah.
first person that I've heard say something that I find intriguing. And if indeed we ever did get that invitation, Project Mbridge makes a very big point of saying that it has the technology to be able to integrate things such as the SWIFT system or XRP or
Right, XRP for sure. Yeah, I think
whatever systems that's highly integratable. And I would add to what you said earlier about why these countries are buying gold. The biggest reason to me is the weaponization of the treasury market. Say what you want. We stole $5 billion from Russia. It's stealing. It's not sanctioning. When you
absolutely.
take it,
Sanctions is why we're here. This is why
but
we're here. It's all we do to try to fix it is more sanctions, and it doesn't work.
they took the assets and bought weapons to give to the Ukraine. And when you go across that line as the world reserve currency, you had Janet Yellen a month ago do an interview on CNBC and say, we're okay with Putin and Xi being friends. And my initial thought was, well, that's very benevolent of you, Madam Secretary. Thank you. But if Xi gives one penny to the Russian war machine, we will sanction their companies, their banks, and Beijing itself. But forget about the fact we've given 260 billion Javelin missiles, F-16s, and intelligence on where to fire it without any congressional oversight. We don't matter because we're the world reserve currency. Our what doesn't stink. But we can go around the world and make these sanctions, but to confiscate Russian funds, flat out take them, steal them, and give them to the Ukraine in the form of munitions is outright idiocy. And it is that has woken up, I think, the world. It's one thing to tell the linchpin of the hegemony, the petrodollar, Saudi Arabia. It's our protection of the Saudi kingdom that has given us this exclusivity where, to your point, everyone's had to stockpile dollars. They've had to stockpile them since 1974 in order to buy oil. That was the deal. They held them prior to that, the Bretton Woods Agreement, of course, and we saw Nixon close the gold window because de Gaulle from France was draining all the gold at $35 an ounce. That was the promise. Our currency used to be backed by gold. Government could turn in any amount they want at $35 an ounce and get gold. That ended. Then we got the petrodollar. That would have been called Bretton Woods 2. And now, as Zoltan Pozar says, who's one of the smartest men I've ever known as well, he used to work at the New York Fed. He understands the plumbing of the system better than anyone. He's at UBS now. He says we're in Bretton Woods 3, a system that will be about commodities. You said he who has the gold makes the rules. I would say he who has the commodities makes the rules. Look what China's done. China bought the London Metal Exchange, which is not the LBMA. The LBMA is precious metals. The LME is base metals. They own it. Copper, zinc, lead, and they are now.
Quick question about that. Is that the same exchange that they sanctioned Russia from being able to put any more metals on there? Did you hear about that story where they got sanctioned for one of the metal exchanges?
Yes, it was, and that's
It's the
not going
same
to
one,
change anything
and it's
because
owned by China.
Russia just backdoors things, and China still has a measure of protocol that must keep in place.
So, I just want to be clear on this. Are you saying that Russia got sanctioned by the United States and England on a metals exchange that's in London that's owned by China?
Correct.
Wow.
And I don't know what type of veto rights China has to any of that. They're
Probably
doing
not.
everything backdoor anyway. If
Right.
they want to keep it, they have to maintain the protocol. But they're now warehousing metals in China that are traded on the LME. I mean, you can see this progression with their Belt Road, the largest infrastructure project in human history. They are going around the world and industrializing all of these African and South American countries and bringing their commodities and their natural resources to the market cooperatively. They are striking deals all around the world. All of the countries that are joining the BRICS are resource rich or very much integral to trade routes or shipping lanes. So it's all about commodities, is what I'm getting at. And when you look at a treasury or the debt of a country, we're almost 200 trillion in debt. Trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. We have 34, almost 35 trillion in debt, but that doesn't take into account 99 trillion underfunded in Medicare Part B, 22 trillion in Medicare Part D, 77 trillion in Social Security. So the numbers are too big. And this is a game that I don't think ends well at all. We are a broke and insolvent country. We are going around the world sanctioning and stealing assets. We're not looked at the way we once were internationally. And then you look at what's happening here at home, and you have to cross your eyes and say, what the hell's going on in this country with the election, the judicial system, the lawlessness, the wokeness, all of these things that make people say, and the fact that we're more divided than we've ever been, we're not united. It makes it easier for these countries to say, well, on top of being hypocritical, broke, and tyrannical, the way that they go in and do these things coercively instead of cooperatively. And then I want to just make a statement to your listeners that I am the least likely person who've ever succeeded. I am the embodiment of the American dream. 34 years ago, I started this company in a one-room office with my dad with a loan from a friend. And we've eclipsed 10 billion in sales without a customer complaint. I love this country, and I thank God every day I was born here. But what is happening to it, what is the direction that we are being taken, where we let 18 million people in here illegally? What immigration system? If 1% of those people want to do harm on this country, that's 180,000 people. How about 5%? That's bigger than any standing army. The things that we have done are so stupid, it's not even funny. And by weaponizing the dollar and the treasury market, by signing executive order to go green, by destroying our immigration, our judicial system, our electoral system, all in question, the lawlessness. You got this, all of these mayors in the big cities that don't prosecute for shoplifting or larceny or drug possession. And you got this Michelle Wu, I think her name is. She's the first Asian American woman mayor in Boston. She wants to do all of these same non-prosecutable laws, including the dumbest thing I've ever heard. If you break into someone's home that's unoccupied because you need to sleep or cold, you don't do damage, it's non-prosecutable. So you take your wife on a trip for a few weeks camping somewhere up in the mountains, you come back and there's someone sleeping in your bed and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it. And we've lost our bearing. And I think that's not lost on the rest of the world either. So this push away from the dollar, I think it's interesting that Jared Bernstein advocates for losing the reserve status. So you weaponize the dollar, you sign executive order to go green, and you make everyone around the world say, what the hell is going? Look at the president in the election last night. I mean, I think
Yeah.
in the debate, I think they rolled him out there knowing his handlers had to have known how inept he is and that he would make a fool of himself. And now they're going to come and say he's got to go. And they'll usher in someone behind door number 2, Michelle or
I don't
Hillary
think so.
or what's his name? What's
Everything
his
you're
name?
saying is good. We have a lot of the same values, is what I'll tell you for sure. Hard work, come from nothing, American, love the country, you hate the way it's going. But you mentioned one thing specifically. There's not a side of our country that's doing this to us. It's people above our
Yeah,
government's pay grade. If you've ever read Creature from Jekyll Island, you know who runs this
I
country
have.
and who runs this world. And I think a lot of times when we have the presidential debate, it's so easy to make fun of Joe Biden because he's awful. Like, I can't imagine watching this guy try to give a press conference again ever. But I believe he's not going to get replaced. They knew what they were doing. He's going to lose because they want Trump in, so that way we will ask for the CBDC. If Biden or Gavin Newsome is in charge, when when whatever crisis comes up that's going to give us the CBDC, people like we would never go for it. We'd be like, no way, that's not even possible. And Trump said no CBDC. So when he comes to us and says, guys, there's no other choice, it looks like we have to do this, we're going to say, we understand. There are entities above our country. And you mentioned it with woke. Woke is a very important concept because the idea that countries can go woke, or that companies can go from woke to broke, is actually not true at all. The more woke they get, the more tax benefits they get, the higher their ESG score goes, which means they'll get more investment. Companies in the United States are incentivized, and in Europe even, because they have ESG scores as well, are incentivized to make their customers mad. Because guess what? You're making more money from the WEF, what they've set up, right? Which is under BIS, but the WEF, what they've set up, you're making more money doing that.
But
That's why the
ultimately
woke
putting
growth thing
yourself out of business.
exactly. So, and it also provides companies like Target, for instance, with incentive to not care what your customers think, because your customers don't like your new modeling pictures up there. Well, they can go away. We can actually get the same amount of money with less customers, and it's easier for everybody. And so, I think when we really do this thing where we tend to think it's like the super leftist people in this country that are doing this to us. No, it's the entities that do not like to be named that are above BIS. this is what they want. They've wanted the downfall of America ever since 1971, for sure. That's when the WEF was created. This was all designed to happen this way, in pattern and rhythm with the normal way that superpowers and reserve currencies fall, because we're at the end of our cycle. So all these people have done is take the natural. If you've seen Ray Dalio's Changing World Order video, they've taken the natural flow of one group of people in the country says, no, we love business. They need to make money. They deserve it. They're not lazy. And then the other side says, no, there's people that can't do what those people do. And so they need to be given the money, and the money needs to be given back to them. And all that's happened is they've just helped push forward and accelerate a little bit of the job of separating us further. We were already going here. It's the natural world order. It's not America. It's not what we're doing here. This is the way the world has behaved pretty much forever. And so my message to people is prepare for this, and let's see if we can get a soft landing for you and your family and become a have instead of a have not. Is that distance is going to grow, is they're constantly incentivized by the World Economic Forum and BIS, right? Their money, I think they're the ones that made the money flower, right? That tells where money's going in the future. We don't listen to especially in crypto. I know your people listen to that stuff a lot more. In crypto, we don't pay any attention to that stuff. And that's all the stuff that matters. So and I've really had this awakening over the last 2 or 3 months as I've really started to understand the entire world global system is a Ponzi. The debt you talked about, that's the only real money in the world. Outside of gold, right? The only real money in the world is debt, because everything else is a derivative. And you can have derivatives on the debt, but the debt's real. And so that's all our fiat and our currencies, they're all trash. So sorry, I just went on a big long rant there, but I think it's really important for the audience to understand. Like, I just don't think there's a person we can blame for this, in my opinion. Maybe at the very top, but this is a world system and world pattern, and there are evil people that take advantage of that.
Have you ever heard of the Cloward Piven theory?
I have. That has to do with trying to break a country with welfare. And I know you'd also mentioned the border. I'm much more concerned about the Chinese citizens coming over than the Mexican immigrants. The Chinese citizens, there's a deal, by the way, between the triad and the cartel that no women, no Asian women or Chinese women are allowed to be touched on their route to the United States. The triad men can mess with them, but the Mexican cartel, nobody's allowed to touch the women, and everybody knows that. They've got deals, and I believe it's because they're sending a lot of able-bodied people, like you said, the 1%. They're sending a lot here, number one, to infiltrate us business-wise, buy the farmland, do all that stuff, the normal stuff they usually do through the Canada market. But also, there is an element of all of this going on behind the scenes that is military. There is a possibility that there is something violent that happens. It's not, I don't think it's likely. I think it's not likely.
I think your listeners, it would behoove them to research, wouldn't take long, the Cloward Piven theory, which is a plan to socialize America by overwhelming the entitlement program. But it's interesting that Cloward and Piven were husband and wife professors who taught at Columbia in the 60s. Well, who went there? Barack Obama, the current Secretary of State, Anthony Bilkin, Attorney General Bill Barr, Eric Holder, Madeleine Albright, and Jared Bernstein, the lead economic advisor of the U.S. government. And the system, the primary objective of the system is to create chaos with hopes of destroying the American capitalist economy. This was taught in Colombia. It's a socialist system that guarantees and leads to universal basic income. And they talk about a couple things. I'll mention that one is a massive drive to recruit the poor under the welfare rolls. The point of surging welfare claims, it says, is to enroll as many individuals as it takes to send the U.S. into economic crisis. Now, think of the 18 million people in here illegal. 65% of all taxpayer subsidized welfare entitlements are people that are in here illegally. But it's even more interesting. And if you think of the inner cities, it says the primary objective of this is to overwhelm the inner cities. And you're seeing that, and that creates an urban doom loop where you get a cycle of people moving away from the city as they get worse. And then things get worse because people are moving away. And then this starts to feed on itself and creates a doom loop. But one of the interesting tenets of the Cloward Piven theory is that you create a new loyal voting bloc out of the increasing number of welfare recipients, not only them, but their children. And so you end up basically making elections a moot point because no one will ever vote for the other side that wants to take away entitlements. And it's a very diabolical thing. And you put all of this stuff together and you have to wonder, is there a fine line between conspiracy and reality? Or
Oh,
are,
absolutely.
are these things true? Like Occam's razor would tell you, the most logical answer prevails. I don't know. I'll leave that up to your people. But I would say, do yourself a favor, just Google, go and read for 10 minutes Cloward Piven theory. It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think I would say it's much more about destroying the country than moving it towards what one side of the country would want, right? And because the way that I've seen politics work in my life is that it seems like every time there's a big presidential election, right? We had some that weren't that big, right? Like Bill Clinton, Bob Dole. Like, okay, who cares, you know? So the thing is in these big elections, what you'll see is that sometimes they will inherit, the winner will win by a landslide, and they will inherit the Senate, the House. They'll inherit it all, you know, maybe some judge nominee. And it's amazing. That's what Trump inherited the first time, right? But it's amazing, isn't it? What did he get done? What did he get
Yeah.
done? We can say he got this done, he got this done. But look back over all the big promises. It's because the way our political system is supposed to work is gridlock. They don't want it to be one side or the other. That's what pushes people on the two sides, and they need people on the two sides to kind of keep things going. That's the way it's always been. There's always been, there might not be only two parties, but in general, there's two prevailing, ways of thought, and it is what I said. It's basically everyone deserves or the people that work the most deserve. Like that's it. Those are the only two basic economic systems that I know of that we have. And so they're always building it towards that. I don't think it's necessarily that they're trying to push us to communism, because communism or capitalism in their truest forms, neither one really kind of works on the extreme level. It's always going to have to be a mix, right? Like we're capitalists, but we got some government programs, we got some stuff, right? It's impossible to have where you have a large government, you're not doing something to help people unless you're a dictator, right? So I think that the whole thing is we are going to get a new financial system. And we get so caught up in capitalists and communists because they're the two general sides, right? Liberal, conservative, right? That's what we're trying to say. You liberals are communists, right? The most extreme are. So, anyways, the point is that we basically have two prevailing ways of thought, like I mentioned. But these are not necessarily, we don't view them as economic systems, really, do we? We view them as national systems, right? We're a capitalist country. Russia, we still think they're communists, even though they're not, just because they're communists for so long, right? The communists and Russia just go hand in hand, and so the whole thing is, since these things are just so far separated from each other, what tends to happen over time is people associate them with the whole country, but in reality, those are financial systems. Those aren't actually governmental systems, and when we're saying like we think that they're going to push us to this side and all of a sudden we're going to be a completely socialist country. Now, look, that might happen by definition. It could happen. But the reality is that's probably not going to happen. We're going to get an entirely new financial system. That's what's coming. You mentioned it. Lynette Zhang mentions it. Everyone sees it. I believe it's tokenization and digital IDs attached to your blockchain. That way they will always know everything you own. And that's how they really get us. Unfortunately, crypto has become, in my opinion, a bit of a Trojan horse. We're here now, but that's why I think Bitcoin and things were created were to get us used to the normality of digital stuff. So eventually they can tie everything they own to you. There's no cash. And that's the Great Reset. The Great Reset is this change in the world. And to do it, they had to get rid of America because we're the capitalist stronghold. So
Or to do it, they just need to make every country on the planet who's accumulated dollars to buy oil, give them a reason to dump it. And if everyone dumped dollars and treasures at once, you would have interest rates spike to the moon to compensate for that hyperinflation. The spiking of interest rates would create a catastrophe with the banks that are overcapitalized or over leveraged and undercapitalized. The stock market, the bond market, the real estate market are all inversely correlated to a spike in interest rates. So the dollar would dump, rates would skyrocket to compensate for that. So the pillars of wealth being the dollar, stock market, the bond market, the real estate market, they all collapse, and the banks that hold the money collapse, as do the insurance companies. And to your point, no one wants to take the CBDC, but have no fear, because the number two economic advisor to the U.S. government is here, Lael Brainerd. She was at the Fed. She was at the
yep,
Treasury before that. She was under Powell at the Fed. She developed the CBDC that is in existence. She developed it with
she has a teach.
MIT. And She's also ran point for Fed Now, which came out about 8 months ago.
Yeah.
It's being piloted. It's Venmo on steroids backed by the Fed. But how do you get people to take a CBDC? Well, you find a villain, right? Instead of defaulting or inflating the way most governments have done, they find a villain. You incentivize the world to dump dollars. It's their fault. It's Xi Jinping and OPEC and Putin, and they dump dollars, massively hitting our shores, creating hyperinflation because there's way more dollars out there than there are here. Interest rates spike to compensate for the loss of purchasing power in that massively inflated environment, and everything, bang, collapses. And now those sons of bitches, they did it to us. How could they do it to us? Have no fear, though. All you got to do is take the CBDC, and you too will be made whole. Or you can starve. That's up to you. Now, when you think about how do you do it, that's how you do it. You reset the system, you blame it on someone else. And the interesting thing about it is that 34, 35 trillion in debt plus Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government military pensions, the unfunded liabilities of 160 trillion are all owed to us. And who's been selling bonds over the last few years? Oh, yeah, that's China, Russia, India. What have they been buying? Commodities like gold, which has no counterparty liability. And gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury over the last 25 years, since 2000, with no counterparty liability. So only about $7 or $8 trillion in money, in assets, or in obligations are owed to foreigners. The rest of it is owed to us. So it's much easier to reset the system, blame it on some people for doing it to us, and give them a solution that they otherwise would not want to take, than it is to fall on the sword for brain dead monetary policy and fiscal irresponsibility to the nth degree, where we're creating $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. This is a situation where I do believe they want to have a CBDC, and the only way that they will be able to do it, a la Lil Brainerd and her plan as a modern monetary theorist, would be to blow it up. And the only way to blow it up without blowing themselves up would be to find a villain. And just like everyone, say what you want about COVID, I'm not commenting on it, or the vaccines, but everyone in this country believed, lots of people did, that it was safe to take a vaccine that had no research on it. And immediately, oh, look, we got a vaccine, and just came out of nowhere. And say what you want about it, was proven to be dangerous, period. And that's the empirical truth. And so just like people were okay with that and took that medicine, if you will, to fix the ill, they will take the CBDC to fix that ill of blowing up the system. It's how you reset, you start over, and largely resetting upon ourselves rather than the rest of the world. And I think when you talk about possibility, yeah, why else would you ever try and sign an executive order to go green and weaponize the dollar and do the things that we have done globally, and then destabilize the United States, where there's no unity and all of these things are happening that we talked about, the election, the border, the judicial system, all of the craziness? It makes sense, right? So who knows how it all plays out, but this is why you own gold, because it is an asset that has no counterparty liability and has been wealth for 5,000 years. This is why you own cryptocurrencies in your own possession, because they lack counterparty risk. And in an environment where that will become very nasty, very systemic, because everything is tied together through derivatives, this is why they had to bail out, why UBS had to buy Credit Suisse. This is why they had to bail out AIG. This is why they had to bail out Silicon Valley Bank, because the systemic nature of the way everything is interconnected, it could very quickly create a daisy chain of chaos. So if you own these assets, certainly it would behoove you, if possible, to hold them in your own possession and remove any and all counterparty liability. And I just think that this is a time where unconventional thoughts reign. Unconventional times call for unconventional thoughts. These are anything but normal. So yeah, I think it's just beginning, and it will accelerate as we head towards the big BRICS meeting in October. And God willing, we have an election in November. I just have a hard time believing it will be smooth sailing between now and the end of the year.
I believe that it will, because I think that the plan is for Biden to lose. I think that's why. Now, Gavin Newsome is the next president after Trump. Gavin Newsome, China is 100% all in on that. I just know that. Trust me. They think Gavin Newsome is the next president. And Gavin Newsome, you think you have to think of the dynamics of replacing Biden. If you're Gavin Newsome, do you want to replace Biden right now? With the country where it is in the BRICS conference in October, right before the election, with the economy where it is? You want that? No. Kamala Harris, maybe they're saying she can step up and she can actually do something and become the president without even Joe Biden dying, whether he is alive or not right now. Like the thing is, that's not going to happen either. It's kind of like, I don't know if you watch football. I love football, real football, not football. And, sometimes you get a coach and, you just say, you know what, that coach right there is not going to be the best fit. But the owner like just kind of keeps him. And that's kind of what we do with our politicians. We know they're not the best fits. We know that, but we just kind of keep them anyways. But my point about the coach was they always say, they get the dreaded vote of confidence. The owners give the vote of confidence knowing they're going to fire the owner. The Democratic Party sent out Joe Biden, right, as the nominee to prove he's not old. You think they didn't know that was going to happen? And they didn't need this to replace him. The Democrats wanted to replace him the whole time. Nobody wants Biden, and the numbers say nobody wants either president. Everyone would prefer, in general, somebody else. And, sometimes they say also in football, it's just not the right job, right? This is a bad job. You look at two football teams, you say, this one right here, man, they don't have a quarterback. Their best player is retiring. One of their best players has an injury that's going to keep him out all season. You're taking that job knowing it's going to be down the road before you're successful. Or you can take this one that's set up perfectly for you. No good coaches take the one that's horrible. They all want the one that's a little bit easier. And I kind of think that that's what we're looking at here. There's not going to be someone who's going to be of quality that's going to want to walk in and replace Biden, because it's going to, number one, it's an almost impossible process for them actually to do it without him stepping down. He's not going to step down. It's very clear he's not going to step down. He hates Trump. He doesn't want it.
Yeah, he may fall
He's
down.
a lifelong politician. He doesn't care about power. I mean, so that's. I think it's going to be Biden losing, and that's what they're marching us towards, to push us towards the CBDC.
Well, we'll find out very soon. We don't have that much time.
Right. Yeah.
These are, as the Chinese curse says, may you live in interesting times, and these sure are. And there'll be a lot to watch as we get closer to not only the big BRICS meeting in October, but any hope of an election in November. And we'll see what happens, I guess. But either way, it's going to be an interesting outcome for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it's been so fascinating talking to you. I love talking to people that actually know what's going on. Nobody else in crypto does. So I got to reach out to crypto and find some really smart people like yourself that have been around that have this experience. So I definitely appreciate you coming on, Andy. Real quick, just tell everybody one more time where they can find you.
info@milesfranklin.com. Any questions, anything you heard here, request a price list that ought to be as good or better than anywhere in America. I'm everywhere on YouTube, and I just am going to reignite my own personal YouTube channel. We just posted something today. I'm going to be doing interviews myself that I haven't done since 2019-ish, 2020. I've just been on other people's shows like yourself. We're all about education and information, and feel free to reach out. No obligation whatsoever. And please let us know that BitBoy sent you, and more than happy to help any way that we can and answer questions. So I do appreciate being here. I'd love to do it again, and we'll see how this all plays out. But either way, people can't get out of the way of what they don't see coming. So learning and listening to other viewpoints, expanding your horizons is something I'm a big advocate of. And you take in as much information as you can from all different angles, and try and make heads and tails of it yourself. Take accountability. So I appreciate it, and hopefully look forward to picking up where we left off not too far down the road.
Absolutely. Definitely love to have you back on, if not much before then, but once we get a little closer to that BRICS conference for sure. So, all right, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. And to our audience, you guys drop your questions down below. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.